You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Thursday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. And you can come on over, see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio and all the places where you can find that this show broadcasts and stores archives like iTunes, iHeartRadio, places like that. You can also come over to my YouTube stream right now and watch this show in its video simulcast. Best part, you can join the live chat room going on right now during the show with the other fellow Intrepids. So come on over to ScottyRoberts.com at YouTube. Well, I did that backwards. YouTube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. It's funny how you can say something 250 times at the beginning of the show and still mess it up at the beginning. So today, we're going to jump right into continuing this story about Cochise and the Apache and what went on in the 1860s to 1870 and 71 and following regarding the Apache in this country. And just as a little recap from yesterday, remember it was Commissioner Coiler who arrived at Camp McDowell late in September. This was 1868. And he had authority to use his soldiers to open up communications with a chief named Delchay. And although truce flags, smoke signals, night fires, and every means of communication were used, they couldn't get Delchay to come in. And Delchay, he wouldn't respond until he had thoroughly tested the intentions of the Bluecoats. And as I've said 100 times throughout this, could you blame him at this point? And by the time he agreed to meet with Captain W.N. Netterville in Sunflower Valley, this was October 31st of, 1871, not 68, Commissioner Coiler had returned to Washington to make his report, and a copy of Delchay's remarks were forwarded to Collier. And this is what we ended on yesterday. Delchay said, "I don't want to run over the mountains anymore. I want to make a big treaty. I will make peace that will last. I will keep my word until the stones melt." Now, he didn't want to take the Tontos back to Camp McDowell, however. It wasn't a good place. After all, he'd been shot and poisoned there, as we mentioned yesterday. And the Tontos preferred to live in Sunflower Valley near the mountains so they could gather the fruit and get the wild game that was there. "If the big Capitan at Camp McDowell does not put a post where I stay," he insisted, "I can do nothing more, for God made the white man and God made the Apache. And the Apache has just as much right to this country as the white man. I want to make a treaty that will last, so that both can travel over the country and have no trouble. As soon as the treaty is made, I want a piece of paper that I can travel over the country as a white man. I will put a rock down to show that when it melts, the treaty is to be broken. If I make that treaty, I expect the big Capitan will come and see me whenever I send for him, and I'll do the same whenever he sends for me. If a treaty is made and the big Capitan does not keep his promises with me, I will put his word on this piece of paper in the dirt, and I will cover it up. I promise that when a treaty is made, the white man or soldiers can turn out all their horses and mules without anyone to look after them. Meaning we're not going to steal them, and if any are stolen by the Apaches, I will cut my own throat. I want to make a big treaty, and if the Americans break the treaty, I do not want any more trouble. The white man can take one road, and I can take the other. If you break this treaty, we'll go our separate ways," he said. "Tell the big Capitan at Camp McDowell that I will go to see him in 12 days. Now, that brings us to where we left off last night. Now, the closest the collier came to Cochise was Cañada Almosa, an agency which had been established by the Indian Bureau 42 miles southwest of Fort Craig in New Mexico. And there he talked with two members of Cochise's band. And they told him that the Chirachua had been in Mexico, but the Mexican government was offering $300 each for Apache scalps. And this had brought out scouting parties who attacked them in the mountains of the Sonora. And they'd scattered and they were returning to their old Arizona strongholds. And Cochise was somewhere in the Dragoon Mountains at this time. Now, a courier was sent to find Cochise, but when the man crossed into Arizona territory, he unexpectedly met General Crook, who refused to recognize his authority to go to Cochise's camp. Crook ordered the courier to return immediately to New Mexico. So Crook wanted Cochise for himself, and to find him dead or alive, he ordered out 5 companies of cavalry to scour the Chiricahua Mountains. And Gray Wolf was the name of the Apaches that the Apaches gave to General Cook. Gray Wolf. Cochise eluded Gray Wolf by crossing into New Mexico. He sent a messenger to the Star Chief at Santa Fe and General Gordon Granger, and he informed him that he would meet him at Cañada Almosa to talk peace. Granger arrived in a 6-mule ambulance with a small escort, and Cochise was waiting for him. The preliminaries were very brief. Both the men were eager to get this matter settled. Cochise wanted it settled. He was done with this. Let's settle it and move on with our lives. For Granger, it was an opportunity to win fame as the man who took the surrender of the great Cochise. So they're viewing this as, in order for him to come in and sign a treaty, it's a surrender. Cochise is viewing it as, I'm a chief, you're a chief, we're going to make peace, we're going to write a treaty. And so for Cochise, it was the end of the road. He was almost 60. He's the age I am now. Except remember, they were outdoors people. They were, lifespans were a little bit shorter, 150 years ago. And he was almost 60 and he was just tired out. And he had streaks of silver that ran through his shoulder-length hair. He was growing older. Now, Granger explained that peace was possible only if the Chiricahua agreed to settle on a reservation. No Apache would be allowed to leave the reservation without a written pass from the agent, the general said to him. And permission would never be given to go on any kind of excursions across the line into Old Mexico. And Cochise replied in a very quiet voice, seldom gesturing, and he said, and remember, these things were all documented as they happened. Scribes took this all down. Cochise said, "The sun has been very hot on my head and made me as in a fire. My blood was on fire. But now I've come into this valley and drunk of these waters and washed myself in them, and they have cooled me. Now that I am cool, I have come with my hands open to you, to live in peace with you. I speak straight, and I do not wish to deceive or be deceived. I want a good, strong, lasting peace. When God made the world, he gave one part to the white man and another to the Apache. Why was it? Why did they come together? Now that I'm to speak, the sun, the moon, the earth, the air, the waters, the birds and beasts, even the children unborn shall rejoice at my words. The white people have looked for me long. I'm here. What do they want? They have looked for me long. Why am I worth so much? If I'm worth so much, why not mark where I set my foot and look where I spit? The coyotes go about at night to rob and kill. I can't see them. I am not God. I am no longer chief of all the Apache. I am no longer rich. I am but a poor man. The world was not always this way. God made us not as you. We were born like the animals, in the dry grass, not on beds like you. This is why we do as the animals. We go about at night and we rob and steal. If I had such things as you have, I would not do as I do, for then I would not need to do so. There are Indians who go about killing and robbing. I do not command them. If I did, they would not do so. There are Indians, my warriors have been killed in Sonora. I came here because God told me to do so. He said it was good to be at peace, so I came. I was going around the world with the clouds and the air when God spoke to my thoughts and told me to come in here and be at peace with all. He said the world for us all. How was it? When I was young, I walked over this country, east and west, and saw no other people than the Apaches. After many summers, I walked again and found another race of people had come to take it away. How is it? Why is it that the Apaches wait to die, that they carry their lives on their fingernails? They roam over the hills and the plains, and they want the heavens to fall on them. The Apaches were once a great nation. They are now but few, and because of this they want to die, and so carry their lives on their fingernails. Many have been killed in battle. You must speak straight, so that your words may go as sunlight to our hearts. Tell me, if the Virgin Mary has walked throughout all the land, why has she never entered the wickiups of the Apaches? Why have we never seen or heard her? I have no father nor mother. I am alone in the world. No one cares for Cochise. That is why I do not care to live, and I wish the rocks to fall on me and cover me up. If I had a father and mother like you, I would be with them and they would be with me. And when I was going around the world, all were asking for Cochise. Now he is here. And, pardon me, folks, live scintillating radio. Yes, you're interrupting. I told you to stay out while I'm doing radio. Yes. There you go. There it is, folks, scintillating live radio. Live recorded radio. My small child asking if she can have the Reese's peanut butter cups right in the middle of Cochise's speech. So sorry about that. That's the way life rolls around here. And if I can just say, interject here, my wife is gone with my oldest son, or with my son, who's the oldest of our 3 children at home, to Boy Scout camp, and is gone for a few days. So it's me and the 2 little girls, the 8-year-old and the 5-year-old. So the 5-year-old especially, you say, Daddy is in the studio doing a radio show. You need to stay outside the studio unless there's an emergency. Like, well, what's an emergency, Dad? Well, you know, like if your arm gets cut off, or you lose a toe, or the house is on fire, or somebody's knocking at the door that you don't recognize. Things like that. Not to ask me if you can have a candy bar. I want a great and lasting peace with my children, but they keep breaking the treaty. All right. Little levity there. Let's go on. To keep the continuity, let me get back into Cochise's speech. I'll go back a couple of sentences. He said, I have no father or mother. I'm alone in the world. No one cares for Cochise. That is why I do not care to live, and I wish the rocks to fall upon me and cover me up. If I had a father and mother like you, I would be with them and they would be with me. When I was going around the world, all were asking for Cochise. Now he is here. You see him. You hear him. Are you glad? If so, say so. Speak, Americans and Mexicans. I do not wish to hide anything from you, nor have you hide anything from me. I will not lie to you. Do not lie to me. So that was his speech. And when the discussion came around to a location for the Chirachua reservation, Granger said that the government also wanted to move the agency from Cañada Almosa to Fort Tularosa in the Mogollons. At Cañada Almasa, 300 Mexicans and settled and already made land claims there. I want to live in these mountains, Cochise protested. I do not want to go to Tularosa. That is a long ways off. The flies on those mountains eat out the eyes of the horses. The bad spirits live there. I have drunk of these waters, and they have cooled me. I do not want to leave here. And that is recorded. A.N. Ellis wrote Recollections of an Interview with Cochise, Chief of the Apaches. Cochise, Chief of the Apaches. And that's the Kansas State Historical Society. You can find that book. You can probably find it other places as well. Just to say it's been documented, these are the things that he said. And General Granger said that he would do what he could to persuade the government to let the Chirachua live in Cañada Almosa, with its streams of clear, cool water. Cochise promised that he would keep his people there in peace with their Mexican neighbors, and he kept his promise. A few months later, however, the government ordered the removal of all Apache from Cañada Almosa to Fort Tularosa. As soon as he heard of the order, Cochise slipped away with his warriors. They divided into small parties, they fleeing once again to their dry and rocky mountains in the southeastern part of Arizona. Now this time Cochise resolved that he would stay there, not coming back down. Let the gray wolf crook come after him if he must. Cochise would fight him with rocks if it need be, and then if God willed it, the rocks could fall on Cochise and cover him up. Now in the time when the corn is taken, that's September of 1872, Cochise began receiving reports from his lookouts that a small party of white men was approaching his stronghold. They were traveling in one of the army's little wagons that were made for carrying wounded men. The lookouts reported that Taglito, the Redbeard, was with them. Tom Jeffords. Now, Cochise had not seen Taglito for a very long time. And back in the old days, after Cochise and Mengus had gone to war with the Bluecoats, Tom Jeffords contracted to carry the mail between Fort Bowie and Tucson. And the Apache warriors ambushed Jeffords and his riders so often that he almost gave up the contract. And then one day, the red-bearded white man came all alone to Cochise's camp. He dismounted, he unbuckled his cartridge belt, and handed it and his weapons to one of the Chiricahua women. With no show of fear whatsoever, Taglito walked over to where Cochise was sitting and sat down beside him. After a proper interval of silence, Taglito Jeffords told Cochise he wanted a personal treaty with him, so that he could earn his living carrying the mails. Cochise was kind of baffled by this. He had never known such a white man. There was nothing he could do but honor Taglito's courage by promising to let him ride his mail route unmolested. Jeffords and his riders were never ambushed again by the Apache. And many times afterward, the tall red-bearded man came back to Cochise's camp, and they would talk and drink tiswin together. Tiswin, I got to tell you exactly what that is. Tiswin is an alcoholic beverage that's brewed from corn. It's corn alcohol, like corn mash. And Tiswin, it's the sacred saguaro wine of the Tohono O'odham group of the Aboriginal Americans who reside primarily in the Sonoran Desert of the southeastern Asia and northwestern Mexico. So basically, they would get together and have drinks. Now, this was a pretty honorable thing that Jeffords did. He came in unafraid, maybe nervous inside, but unafraid, and he sat down with the chief in great respect and asked for his permission to run his mail routes. So this is the way, he says, I'm sure in their conversation they talked about ways that we live and make our livings and keep our families fed. This is how I do it. Will you please grant me permission? And they became friends. Now, Cochise knew that if Taglito, Jeffords, was with the party coming into the mountains, they were searching for him. And he sent his brother Juan to meet the white men. and then waited in concealment with his family until he was certain that everything was all right. Then he rode down with his son Naichi. Dismounting, he embraced Jeffords, who said in English to a white-bearded man in dusty clothing, "This is Cochise." The right sleeve of the bearded man's coat was empty, and he didn't have any insignia on his sleeve. He looked like an old warrior, and Cochise was not surprised when Taglito called him a general. He was Oliver Otis Howard. "Buenos dias, senor," Cochise said, and they shook hands. One by one, Cochise's guard of warriors came in, and they formed a semicircle, sitting on blankets, for a council with the one-armed graybeard. Oh, and by the way, the sleeve, empty sleeve, he meant, armless. And, will the general explain the object of his visit? Cochise asked in Apache. Taglito translated the words. "The Great Father, President Grant, sent me to make peace between you and the white people," General Howard said. "Nobody wants peace more than I do," Cochise assured him. "Then," said Howard, "we can make peace." Cochise replied that the Chirachua had attacked no white men since their flight from Cañada Almosa. "My horses are poor and few," he added. "I might have brought in more by raiding the Tucson road, but I didn't do it." Howard suggested the Chirachua could live better if they would agree to move to the big reservation on the Rio Grande. "I've been there," Cochise said, "and I like the country. Rather than not have peace, I will go and take such of my people as I can, but that move will break up my tribe. Why not give me Apache Pass? Give me that, and I will protect all roads. I will see that nobody's property is taken by the Indians." Howard was surprised. "Perhaps we could do that," he said, and then he went on to point out that the advantages of living on the Rio Grande. Cochise was no longer interested in the Rio Grande. "Why shut me up on the reservations?" he asked. "We will make peace. We will keep it faithfully, but let us go around free, as Americans do. Let us go wherever we please." Now, Howard tried to explain that the Chirachua country did not belong to the Indians, that all the Americans had an interest in it. To keep the peace, he said, we have to fix metes and bounds. And Cochise could not understand why boundaries could not be fixed around the Dragoon Mountains as well as on the Rio Grande. "How long, General, will you stay?" he asked. "Will you wait for my capitains to come in and have..." All right, gang, welcome back to the program. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. This is segment 2 for tonight. And you can watch or you can listen in audio format via Odyssey Radio. Just go over to odysy1.com and see all the outlets where you can hear this show audibly. You can also come on over to my YouTube channel, watch the video simulcast, and join the live chat room that's going on right now with a lively bunch of Intrepheads over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Now, we left off on this story about Cochise, and they've sent out General Howard, and they've sent out his friend, Jeffries, to try to work a peace with them. And Howard said that he's offering them land on the Rio Grande. He's really pushing this as a reservation. And Cochise is saying, why not just make it here, where we live? He says, I'll go there, and we'll even protect the roads for you. We will be Americans like you. We will guard the land. We will walk freely as you walk, rather than hose us up in a reservation. And Howard said that's not a bad idea to go down there to Apache Pass. He says, but we have to work with these meets and these boundaries. And so General Oliver Otis Howard, straight-laced New Englander, graduate of West Point, hero of Gettysburg, loser of an arm in the Battle of Fair Oaks, Virginia. He remained in the Apache camp for 11 days and was completely won over by the courtesy and direct simplicity of Cochise. Remember Whitman? Was it Whitman or was it, why is his name escaping me? The one captain who, once he was in the presence of these Native American men, said, I found them to be the most honorable people I had ever met, and much superior than most of the whites I know. And so once they spent time with these people, they found out who they really were and what they were made of. Now, this is not to say, and you all know this very well about me now, human beings are human beings. The Indians had good guys and they had bad guys within their numbers. Cochise, though, proved over and over again that he wanted peace and that he was a decent man and he would keep his word. And he won over General Oliver Howard. And so he was charmed by the Chirachua women and the children. And he was won over by the courtesy and direct simplicity of Cochise. He said, I was forced to abandon the Almosa scheme, he wrote afterward, and to give them, as Cochise had suggested, a reservation embracing a part of the Chirachua Mountains and of the big valley adjoining on the west, which included the Big Sulphur Spring and Rogers Ranch. One more matter had to be settled. By law, a white man must be appointed agent for the new reservation. And so for Cochise, this wasn't really a problem. There was only one white man that all the Chirachua trusted, and it was Taglito, the red-bearded Tom Jeffords. At first, Jeffords objected. He had no experience in that line of work, and besides, the pay was pretty poor. Cochise insisted until at last Jeffords gave in, and after all, he owed the Chiricahuas his life and his prosperity. So less fortunate were Delche's Tonto Apaches and Escamindans of Aravipos, which we talked about last night. After Delche's offer to the big Capitan at Camp McDowell to make a treaty if a Tonto agency was established in Sunflower Valley, the chief received no reply. Delche accepted this as a refusal. God made the white man and God made the Apache, he had said, and the Apache has just as much right to the country as the white man. He had made no treaty, he received no piece of paper so that he could travel over the country as a white man. Therefore, he and his warriors traveled over the country as Apaches. The white men did not like this, and late in 1872 the Gray Wolves sent soldiers hunting through the Tonto Basin for Delche and his warrior band, and not until the time of the Big Leaves, April of 1873, did the soldiers come in sufficient numbers to entrap Delche and the Tontos. They were surrounded, with bullets flying among their women and children, and there was nothing to do but raise a white flag. The black-bearded soldier chief, Major George M. Randall, took the Tontos to Fort Apache on the White Mountain Reservation. In those days, the Gray Wolf preferred to use his soldier chiefs instead of civilians as reservation agents. They made the Apache wear metal tags like dogs. You can almost think of it as the yellow star of the Jews in World War II, which was just really only about 50 years later. And these tags had numbers on them, so that it was impossible for anyone to slip away to the Tonto Basin, even for a few days. So Delche and the others grew homesick for their timbered, snowy-topped mountains. And on the reservation, there was never enough of anything. There was never enough food. There were never enough tools to work with. They didn't get along with the Coyoteros, who looked upon them as intruders on their reservation. But it was lack of freedom to travel over the country that kept the Tontos miserable. At last, in the time of ripeness, this is July of 1873, Delche decided he would no longer bear confinement at White Mountain. And one night he led his people in flight. And to keep the Bluecoats from hunting them down, again he decided to go to the reservation on the Rio Verde. A civilian agent was in charge there, and he promised Delche that the Tontos could live at Rio Verde if they made no trouble for him. If they ran away again, they would be hunted down and killed. And so Delche and his people went to work building a rancheria on the river near Camp Verde. Now notice what these people are enduring. You can stay here, but if you leave, if you run, we'll hunt you down and kill you. You start to get visions of, again, 50, 60 years in the future, almost 70 years, with 60 years, the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland. You have to stay there. You can get permission to leave, but you have to get permission to leave. You have to wear the yellow star. This is the same type of thing going on, just different warfare, different leaders in place. So they're threatened. You can be here, but if you leave, if you run, scatter, we'll hunt you down and we'll kill you. So a civilian agent was in charge, and he promised Delche that the Tontos could live at Rio Verde if they didn't make any trouble. Otherwise, they'd hunt them down and kill them. So Delche and his people went to work building their rancheria. And that summer, there was an uprising at San Carlos Agency in which a little soldier chief, Lieutenant Jacob Alme, was killed. The Apache leaders fled, some of them toward the Rio Verde, and they camped near Delche's rancheria. And rancheria, however you want to, probably rancheria, the way Mexican flows. And so when the Gray Wolf heard of this, he accused Delche of aiding the fugitives and sent an order to Camp Verde to have the Tonto chief arrested. Forewarned, Delche decided he would have to flee once again. He didn't want to lose what little freedom he had left, to be locked in irons and shut into a 16-foot hole that the soldiers had dug out of the canyon side for Indian prisoners. And so with a few loyal followers, he ran away to the Tonto Basin. And he knew that the hunt would soon begin, and the Gray Wolf would not rest until he had tracked Delche down. For months, Delche and his men eluded the hunters. At last, General Crook, Gray Wolf, decided that he could not keep troops forever prowling through the Tonto Basin. Only another Apache could find Delche. And so the general had announced that he would pay a reward for Delche's head. In July 1874, 2 mercenary Apaches reported separately to Crook's headquarters. Each presented a severed head identified as Delche's. Being satisfied that both parties were earnest in their beliefs, Crook said, and the bringing in of an extra head was not amiss, I paid both parties. So he didn't care about the life that was lost. But the heads, with those of other slain Apaches, were mounted on the parade ground at Rio Verde and San Carlos. Now, you get a picture of medieval times, I think what immediately comes to mind is William Wallace. The movie Braveheart gives us a rendition of his story. When he was finally captured and killed as a freedom fighter, in his eyes, but as a traitor, as a murderer in the eyes of the British, he was drawn and quartered, and his arms and his head was put on London Bridge on display on a pike, and his arms and legs were sent to the four corners of the kingdom to show that this is your great hero. This is what he did with those heads. This is the civility of the whites, the civility of the United States government. The heads were put on display on the public parade grounds at Rio Verde and San Carlos. So now Escamindzen and the I always stumble on this word even though I've said it 100 times. The Aravaipas found it difficult to live in peace after that. Can you only imagine? After Commissioner Collier's visit in 1871, Escamindzen and his people started life anew at Camp Grant. They rebuilt their Wickiup village, and they replanted their grain fields. Just as everything seemed to be going well, however, the government decided to move Camp Grant 60 miles to the southeast, using this move as an excuse to clear the San Pedro Valley of Indians. The Army transferred the Aravaipa to San Carlos and a new agency on the Gila River. The move was made in February of 1873, and the Aravaipa were beginning to build new rancheria and to plant new fields at San Carlos when the uprising occurred in which Lieutenant Alme was killed. Now, neither Escamindzen nor any of the other the Aravaipa had anything to do with the killing. But because Escamindzen was a chief, the Grey Wolf had ordered him arrested and confined as a military precaution. And he remained a prisoner until the night of January 4th of 1874, when he escaped and led his people away from the reservation. For 4 cold months, they roamed the unfamiliar mountains in search of food and shelter. And by April, most of the Aravaipa were sick and hungry, and to keep them from dying, Escamindzen returned to San Carlos and sought out the agent. "We have done nothing wrong," he said, "but we are afraid. That's why we ran away. Now we come back. If we stay in the mountains, we'll die of hunger and cold sickness. If American soldiers kill us here, it'll be just the same. We will not run away again." So as soon as the agent reported the return of the Aravaipa, an order came from the army to arrest Escamindzen and his sub-chiefs, hobble them with chains so they could not escape, transport them as prisoners of war to the new site of Camp Grant, 60 miles down the river. "What have I done?" Escamindzen asked the soldier chief who came to arrest him. The soldier chief didn't know. The arrest was a military precaution, he informed him. At the new Camp Grant, Escamindzen and his sub-chiefs were kept chained together while they made adobe bricks for new buildings at the post. At night they slept in their chains on the ground. They ate food that was discarded by the soldiers. This is how they were treated. One day in that summer, a young white man came to see Escamindzen, told him that he was the new agent at San Carlos. He was John Clume. He said the Aravaipa at San Carlos needed their chief to lead them. "Why are you a prisoner?" Clume asked. "I haven't done anything," Escamindzen replied. "White men tell lies about me, maybe. I always try to do right." Now, Clum said that, Clum, however you want to say it. And by the way, this quote of Escamindzen's was written by Woodworth Clum, the Apache agent, the story of John P. Clum, in 1936. Clum said he would arrange his release if Escamindzen would promise to help him improve the conditions at San Carlos. So 2 months later, Escamindzen rejoined his people. Once again, the future looked bright, but the Aravaipa chief was wise enough not to hope for too much, as you can well imagine at this point. So since the coming of the white men, he was never sure of a place where he could spread his blanket. The future for any Apache was very uncertain. So in the spring of 1874, Cochise became very ill from a debilitating disease. Tom Jeffords, the Chirachua agent, brought the army surgeon from Fort Bowie to examine his old friend, but the surgeon couldn't determine the ailment. His prescriptions brought no improvement, and the muscular body of the great Apache leader began wasting away. During this time, the government decided that money could be saved by consolidating the Chirachua agency with the new Hot Springs agency in New Mexico. So when the officials came to discuss the matter with Cochise, he told them the transfer was a matter of indifference to him. I don't really give a flying fuck, is kind of the position he's in. He told them the transfer was a matter of indifference. He'd be dead before he could be moved anywhere. His sub-chiefs and his sons objected strongly, however, declaring that if the agency was moved, that they weren't going to go. Not even the United States had enough troops to move them, they said, because they'd rather die in their mountains than live at the hot springs. After the government officials departed, Cochise grew so weak and was suffering from such intense internal pain that Jeffords decided to ride to Fort Bowie for the surgeon. As he was preparing to leave, Cochise asked, "Do you think you'll ever see me alive again?" Jeffords replied with the frankness of a brother, "No, I do not think I will." "I think I will die about 10 o'clock tomorrow morning," said Cochise. "Do you think we will see each other again?" Jeffords was silent for a moment. "I don't know. What do you think about it?" "I don't know," Cochise answered. "It's not clear to my mind, but I think we will. Somewhere up there." And this was a little exchange that was found in Pioneer Days in Arizona, published in 1932, written by Frank Lockwood. Now, Cochise was dead before Jeffords returned from Fort Bowie. After a few days, the agent announced to the Chirachua that he felt it was time for him to leave. They would not hear of it. Cochise's sons, Taza and Naichi, were especially insistent that he remain. If Taglito, Redbeard, Jeffords deserted them, they said, the treaty and the promises made between Cochise and the government would be worthless. So Jeffords promised to stay. He felt very compelled, especially in the honor of his friend Cochise. So by the springtime of 1875, most of the Apache bands were either confined to reservations or had fled to Mexico. And in March, the Army transferred General Crook from Arizona to the Department of the Platte. The Sioux and the Cheyenne, who had endured reservation life longer than the Apaches, were starting to grow rebellious. Now, keep in mind the date here. This is 1875 in the spring. And what have you got? The Sioux and Cheyenne over on the Platte were beginning to grow restless. What happened the next year? The next year is when you had the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and what we've come romantically in white history to refer to as Custer's Last Stand. So you can see this is all leading up to 1876. So a forced peace lay over in the deserts, the peaks and the mesas of the Apache country. I read that wrong. A forced peace lay over the deserts and the peaks and the mesas of the Apache country. Ironically, its continuance depended largely upon the patient efforts of two white men who had won the regard of the Apaches simply by accepting them as human beings rather than bloodthirsty savages. Tom Jefferson, the agnostic, and John Clume of the Dutch Reformed Church were optimistic, but they were wise enough not to expect too much. For any white man in the Southwest who defended the rights of the Apache, their futures were very, very uncertain. And by the way, when I talked about the the Tisman that they were drinking. That's actually Escamenzin. I've got a note here. Escamenzin wasn't referring to the alcoholic beverage known by the same name, but to roasted leaves of the agave, a sweet, nutritious food that was cooked in earthen pits. And Mescalero Apache received their name from it. So there you go. Little note on what Jeffords and Cochise would imbibe in when they got together. Now, we've only got about 6 or 7 minutes of this segment left. And we can start getting into the next section of this. All of you, let me know what you think of this series. We've been on this for a month. We've got tomorrow left this week to dig into some of these things. And we've certainly got Sunday morning coming up, 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, right here. It's not on the Odyssey Radio Network. It's just our little live chat time on Sunday mornings. And we can go into this next week. I really think, even though I'm asking you, I think it's important that we move on with this. I think there are things we need to know, we need to talk about. Niall Parkinson in the chat room, he and I are going to get together. We're going to talk about the Irish Troubles and the IRA, the Ulster Defense League, things like that down through the last 100 years. We're going to probably do a little series upcoming on the Irish uprisings, the troubles with England, and so on. But for now, I think I'm going to stay in this. I want us to move on, and I want us to get this history in not only our heads, but in our hearts. So I'm going to move on. The next section I have is about Captain Jack. You may have heard about him. I know there was a movie made a long time ago in the 60s with Charles Bronson. Remember him from Death Wish in the 60s? Tough guy. He played Captain Jack in a movie. I don't know how accurate it was. I haven't seen that movie in 40 years. I saw it as a kid. But let's start this new section. Now that we've finished with Cochise and the Apache for the present moment, let's move on to Captain Jack. And let's set a little context with the dates here. 1873. In January, the U.S. Congress begins the investigation of Credit Mobilier scandal. On March 3rd, the Salary Grab Act raises salaries of congressmen and government officials retroactively. And we see that still going on today, don't we? May 7th, the U.S. And by the way, did you know that in some of the stimulus packages to help common Americans who are struggling through the pandemic and the closings and losings of jobs, the Democrats keep putting in raises of salaries for Congress? They better watch out what they're doing. I will make this one note that it seems no matter what party you support, what side of the political equation you're on, everybody's pretty decided who they're going to vote for. I don't think you're going to change anybody's mind. So nothing is good and nothing is bad. Everything can go by the wayside. It's going to take acts of God to convince anybody to go one way or the other at this point, I think. So, let's move on. On May 7th of 1873, the U.S. Marines land in Panama to protect American lives and property. September 15th, the last units of German army leave France. September 19th, the failure of J. Cook and Company banking firm precipitates this financial panic. And on September 20th, the New York Stock Exchange closes for 12 days. There's a severe economic crisis that spreads across the nation and the world. The same year, Jules Verne, Around the World in 80 Days, and Mark Twain's The Gilded Age were published. I have a quote here for you. And this is by Kintpuash, or Captain Jack of the Modocs. He said, I am but one man. I am the voice of my people. Whatever their hearts are that I talk, whatever their hearts are, that I talk. I want no more war. I want to be a man. You deny me the rights of a white man. My skin is red. My heart is a white man's heart. But I'm a Modoc. I'm not afraid to die. I will not fall on rocks. When I die, my enemies will be under me. Your soldiers began on me when I was asleep on Lost River. They drove us to these rocks like a wounded deer. I've always told the white man heretofore and to come and settle in my country, that it was his country and Captain Jack's country. That they could come and live there with me, and that I was not mad with them. I've never received anything from anybody, only what I bought and paid for myself. I've always lived like a white man and wanted to live so. I've always tried to live peaceably and never asked any man for anything. I've always lived on what I could kill and shoot with my own gun and catch in my trap. That's Kintpuash, Captain Jack of the Modocs. Might I say, the original Captain Jack. And tomorrow we're going to talk about Kintpuash, Captain Jack. We're going to see more about him. If you get a chance, I don't know that it's a good movie or a bad movie. I know it's a classic movie at this point. Go look up Captain Jack with, why did I just slip out of Charles Bronson in the lead role of that? Might find something interesting to watch. And Captain Jack, I wonder if I've got a picture of him here that I could share with you. I do. That's not a very good picture. I'm going to see, do I have a minute at the end of the show here to show you Captain Jack? Captain Jack, the Modoc. Let's find a good picture of him and I'll share it with you. Here he is. Kintpuash, remember, was his name. And I'm going to save this image. I know this is scintillating right now for this kind of talk at the end of the show. But I don't want to get into the news segment, and I don't want to drag on anything else, but I do want to show you what he looked like. And this is who we're going to talk about. We're going to call this Captain Jack. And you can't see the things that are popping up on my screen right now, but I'm going to browse for this picture that I just saved. And let's see where it came up. Right there. Here we go. Here is Captain Jack of the Modoc. This is the man who I just read to you about. And this is a man who... this whole section we can entitle The Ordeal of Captain Jack. And we're going to start this tomorrow. All right, folks. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for listening. We're going to take a 24-hour break, and we're a 23-hour break, and we'll be back. So you guys sit tight, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.